Security is more common in the sense that people know that it is important. Every year we have more and more data breaches, but sometimes security needs to also understand that we need to make it usable and make it in a way so that the users, like the software engineers, they can cooperate with the security versus seeing it like something, oh, it's annoying, I don't want to do it. But it is also very important, and I think we need to have more awareness outside of our industry as well.
All right, welcome to the show, Anmol.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so you're a senior security or cybersecurity researcher at Nokia. What are some of the things that you're working on in this role?
So, in my role, I primarily work on security standardization. So, when we have these new telecommunications networks like 5G or 6G, then we need to standardize it because, for example, 5G is for when you have your phone and you're trying to make a call. And let's say you travel and you still want to make calls and text your friends and go on a video chat. So, to enable that technology, we use telecommunications. And when we have standards, it's to say that everyone in the world agrees that these are the things we need to make these networks a reality. And there are different generations of these networks. Like on your phone, you might have had 4G, and maybe now some people have 5G. So every time we add an update to the network, it's the next G or the next number.
So what is a G?
A G is generation. G is short for generation. So 5G means fifth generation.
I thought it was going to be some fancy terminology, but it's just generation.
No,
That
it
makes it
just means
easy.
generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 6Gs, so we have 5G now. 5G's been
hmm
rolling out, and I know there's been some, I don't know about controversy, but a little bit of controversy of people worried. I know I've had some friends that, I've talked to that it seems like their worries are overblown, but I still want to listen to see what their concerns are about radiation or something about the 5G towers. And I think a lot of that has been sort of just explained better and people are getting more comfortable with it. So what's coming with 6G? I imagine it's going to be faster, but what else would 6G bring and why would we need it?
So basically, with every generation, we're trying to improve the previous generation, add more features, add more technology to it. Um,
hmm
guess the technology probably we're gonna use. You probably know it.
Does it start with an A and end in an I?
Yes, exactly. So one of the main features of 6G that you'll find is this idea of an AI native network. So that's a big thing with 6G is previously we only had AI for a few things, and now we're going to add functionality for AI throughout the network for different network functions or different functionality. And the goal is to basically leverage all the good things about AI, right? Like more advanced data analytics, make it faster. Basically, that's the main thing with 6G is accounting for the new technologies that we might see. For example, in 2030, maybe we'll have holograms or new technology like that with AI. And we want to make sure, like, when I use an AI avatar on my Zoom application, I can use it without having some delay or latency. I want to be able to talk with you on our podcast, right? And it be fast and not be slow and buffering every 2 seconds. So that's basically what 6G is. We're trying to accommodate new technology and make sure it's fast. So when you talk to your friends on the other side of the world, you can do it quickly and it won't be like, oh, it's buffering and then you can't hear them and then you can't follow the conversation.
Right. So when you talk about AI in this context, so I know there's a couple of, and maybe this is a more technical terminology, so we can get into that a little bit. So there's machine learning, which is more around my understanding at least, and help me help me explain this, but it's more analytics based and just kind of training it to look for patterns and things. And then there's AI. When I think of AI now, I think of like ChatGPT. And, sometimes that gets it wrong. I'll ask it a question and then it'll very, very confidently give me the completely wrong answer. So when I hear, oh, 6G is going to be based on AI, I immediately think, oh, well, I'm sure it'll be helpful for a lot of things, but it also may get things, spectacularly wrong. And there may be risks around that. So could you help our audience, understand how AI is going to, not help things, but also not mess it up along the way?
Yeah, yeah. So I also teach, I just wanted to add, I teach at George Washington University and I teach AI and machine learning. And a
Okay.
lot of students have this idea of AI is like ChatGPT, but actually, AI is a lot more than just ChatGPT. It's basically anything that involves a prediction. So
Mm,
you mentioned machine learning and you mentioned AI. I'll talk about machine learning first and then I'll talk about AI. So, machine learning is like the machine is trying to learn patterns, like you were saying. So, for example, let's say, in your background there, I see you have a tree and you have a clock. And let's say your machine learning algorithm is trying to say, like, is that a tree or is that a clock? And what it would do is it learns the patterns of like that means a tree because it has the branches, the leaves, the color. And then it says, okay, I think that's a tree. So that's what machine learning is doing. It's looking at these patterns. And so AI initially before ChatGPT, we actually did have AI. It's an old technology. It's just improving with every generation, like in telecommunications. So AI is there are two types of AI that you can think of. Predictive analytics. So that's like adding to machine learning. So I can use AI to say, yes, that's a tree. Or it could also be the other type, which is generative AI, which means like ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, pick your tool. And what generative AI is it's looking at the text and the voice and the different elements within that data to say, I can predict you're trying to ask this. And then it does basically a lookup and says, if I type in what is the weather, then it might predict in a city. And this is actually coming from machine learning. It's coming from something we worked on way before generative AI, and it was called natural language processing. And
sure.
that meant basically using machine learning to look at patterns, but instead of images or a clock and a tree, it was looking at words. So, for example, you would train it on a story or passages, and then it would tell you the patterns. And so, what ChatGPT is doing, it's doing that much faster because it's able to access all this data on the internet. It's not confined to just a single book or a single passage anymore. But with generative AI, it's just trying to predict maybe the next word, and then it's trying to generate new content based on what it's learning. So if I ask it, like, tell me everything about Data and Confused, the podcast, it might just say, okay, this is what I found about the podcast. So what it's doing is it's basically searching all this data and then outputting it into text. And now newer tools and newer features are also looking at voice. They're looking at images, and I think Sora is also trying to do video. But it's basically what it's learning is machine learning, so looking at all this data and then trying to generate something that seems believable, right? If we think about the videos and the images and the voice.
Right. So for these telecommunication companies that are going to be building these networks, I mean, they're constantly improving and updating things anyway. So, it seems like it's just a continuous improvement that's happening, and this is just the next logical step. So, but
Yes.
with AI, because OpenAI and these guys are building these massive new data centers and capacities for doing AI, do the telecommunications companies, are they going to be building their own AI that's just like completely separate that works within the networks? Or are they going to be leveraging, the platforms that, OpenAI and these other guys are doing? Or is it a little bit of both?
So in telecommunications, there are different kinds of AI that we're thinking of using. One is AI like predictive analytics, so not generative AI, just the standard looking at patterns. And then
Mhm.
the other type of generative AI, it hasn't been finalized if we're using generative AI or not. So actually 6G, right? We're just starting it right now. So we don't
Right,
actually know what it's going to look like.
right.
What's interesting is Nokia recently got a $1 billion investment from Nvidia.
I saw
And
that
so
in the news.
Nvidia
Yeah, yeah.
is, yeah. So Nvidia is going to invest in Nokia's AI RAN technology. So when we
Mhm.
have these base stations, they're like the cell phone towers. You could think of it like that. And we could potentially add AI to that as well. And the goal with AI is to analyze this data and make it more fast. Now, how to actually do this, that's a research question, which we're not sure yet. That's something, in 5 years or in 10 years, we might know exactly what it looks like. So, yeah, to answer your question, it could be a little bit of both. It could be one, it could be none of them. We don't know yet, right? So, that's something we're going to build after we standardize, like, this is what 6G looks like. And then after that, it takes maybe a few years to determine, okay, this is what the products might look like. And then after that, it will be available to the consumer. So 6G is coming out with standardization in 2030, but that's standardization. That's not the products yet.
Right, right, right. That's the standard. So who all is involved in the standard? Obviously, Nokia is, and probably other telecommunications companies. Like, who all is involved? Is it primarily private sector drives it, and then the government, approves it in the end, or is the government involved a lot in the beginning? How do these standards get formed?
So there are so many different standards out there and standards
Yeah,
bodies, even in
I imagine.
telecommunications. So
Yeah.
I'm involved in a few of them. But to give you an example, there are many different companies all over the world, and they're all trying to come together and say, yes, we agree. This is what 5G is, or this is what 6G is. And it involves everyone around the world, including the US, Europe, Asia, China, India, companies basically everywhere. Any major telecommunications company, not only companies like Nokia, but even companies like AT&T or T-Mobile, they're involved as well. So your cell phone carriers are involved. Government is involved as well. And it's basically academia as well. So it's government, private sector, academia. And all of these companies and all these organizations from all around the world, they're all collaborating with each other. So it's not like government drives it or private sector drives it. It's that an organization would say, hey, I have this idea. And then everyone says, okay, we like this idea. Or no, we don't like this idea. Go back to the drawing board. And so we have these meetings depending on the standards body several times a year. And also within the government, so for example, the US government, they have their own initiatives as well, where they're looking at telecommunications technology and how it's evolving. For example, I'm involved in the FCC Council on Communications Security and Reliability, CSRIC. And that's like a US government FCC council where they're basically saying, hey, private sector, what is 5G or 6G going to look like? And what should the FCC prioritize in their recommendations? And then we provide recommendations to the government, like, yeah, you should look at these things. And then the government takes that as input. So it's like many different things going on, but it's standards, but then there's also government initiatives as well, and academia is involved as well.
Right, right. So is 6G going to use different radio frequencies than we're seeing being used right now? Do
So
we
I
know
can't
yet?
answer that because we don't know yet.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't know yet.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I imagine it probably will, just because I think just the data requirements, right? I think we're gonna have just things need to be faster, higher data requirements, especially you're talking about doing holograms and
Yeah.
more video. It's just like just more, more, more. So I would imagine that the FCC would need to look at, and other standards bodies in other countries look at carving out some new frequencies for 6G to run on in order for it to accommodate that. So, but I understand that's maybe still up in the air, and so to speak. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
Up in the air. 6G.
Yeah, it's first we need to decide what do we want to do. And
Yeah.
then also, security comes in as well, is what security features do we need to add? Like AI, if we have AI, we also need to secure it. So once we know
Right.
what it looks like, then people go and start implementing it, deploying it, releasing products around it.
So that's what your focus is that right? Is primarily on security and cybersecurity.
Yeah, primarily on security. So when the architecture team says, hey, we want to add these things to 6G, then my team is saying, okay, we look at these features. What are the security aspects or features we need to add to make sure it's secure?
So they see you as being the wet blanket? They're like, "We had this great idea," and then Anmol comes along and says, "Nope, you can't do that." Or are you trying to do something to, I don't know, it cybersecurity's kinda always been that way, right? Where it's like, "Well, we can do that, but it's not a great idea." Are we getting to the point where we can, I don't know, maybe do security from the start, that we're thinking about security from the beginning? It didn't seem like that's been the case, but is there an opportunity to do that, and is that what you're looking at doing with 6G?
So, like, I can answer first telecommunications, but then the industry generally. So, in telecommunications, we have these different groups that are in charge of different things. Like, there's one group for architecture, one group for security, one group for other stuff. And what we're doing is we're all meeting, like, security team has a meeting, but then we always connect with the architecture team, so we're collaborating from the start. It's not like we let the architecture team do everything and then we do security, like bolting it on later. Because if you do that, it's just going to be not ideal. I think in the industry, though, we're seeing, I think security is more common in the sense that people know that it is important. Every year we have more and more data breaches, but I still remember when I was a software developer and our security team was trying to give us security related training, like, hey, make sure you don't put passwords into your GitHub repo. And what the security team did was they said, let's just say if your GitHub pull request has the word password in it, we won't allow it. But we actually needed the word password to do our unit testing to say, yes, we need to log in and create a dummy password, dummy username. And so sometimes security needs to also understand that we need to make it usable and make it in a way so that the users, like the software engineers, they can cooperate with the security versus seeing it like something, oh, it's annoying, I don't want to do it because like I'm just trying to get my unit tests in. I don't want to worry about like, oh, I use the word password. Because then people are going to find ways around it. So instead of using the word password, what if we just use like PWD? And then you could keep adding guardrails around it, but then people might keep finding ways around that as well. So when we're talking about security, it should also be usable, but it is also very important. And I think we need to have more awareness outside of our industry as well. Because I think we have Cybersecurity Awareness Month, but then do people outside of security really understand why it's important?
See, and I come from the generation even before that, where it's like we were on dial-up and may or may not have been, using the phone system, hacking into the phone system itself, right? Because back in the day, I mean, that was the original hackers before there was the internet. hackers were hacking into the phone system. And at that time, the telecommunication systems, there literally was no security, or if there was, it was just very rudimentary. They relied on just physical security, right? If you had access to the system, then great, you're in, and that's it. Or maybe there was, just like one password or just like one code or something you needed to know to sort of get into the next level. So telecom I think, has always been in the bullseye from an offensive standpoint, right? That hackers from the beginning of the internet starting to come around have seen that as being a target. What do you see now? Because, just in the last year, we saw all the major telecommunications companies through Salt Typhoon getting hacked by probably the Chinese. It was the Chinese government that went in and got into most, if not all, of these telecommunication systems. What have we learned from that, and how can we prevent that kind of thing from happening for the future networks?
Yeah. So standards is just one piece of the puzzle, right? We can say that we recommend having these things like access control, integrity protection, best practices for security, but then to actually have secure networks, that's something that's more on the operator standpoint. And sometimes, as many defenses as you can add, you'll still maybe miss something. It's not that someone really messed up. It's that adversaries keep getting smarter. And so they'll keep finding ways around it. And so it's much easier, I would say, to be offensive versus defensive. Because for offensive, you just need to find one way in. And then defensive, you need to anticipate like everything that could possibly happen, completely like just foolproof everything. And even then, with the guardrails, you might miss something. I mean, it's not possible to have a 100% secure system. The old dialogue of like the most secure system is the one that's like a safe at the bottom of the ocean, but then you can't really use it. I think it just teaches us that security is still important and we just need to keep adding security features and making sure, from a software standpoint, keep your software up to date, apply the patches as soon as they're available. But I think it's just a matter of, offense is so much easier than defense.
And with AI coming, is that going to help offense more or defense more?
I think both. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
it's
how's it going to
basically
help offense? Let's start with offense first. So,
Yeah, I think so. AI is basically a tool and you can use it for good or evil. If you use it for offense, basically AI is a very powerful data analytics engine. It gets you data much faster. And generative AI can create things for you. So for offensive, people are actually using AI to create attacks much faster. In the past, you would actually have to code the attack yourself, right? You would have to code ransomware. You would have to have some technical knowledge to execute these attacks. But now they have these tools like ransomware as a service where anyone can go and buy these tools that do this attack for them. In the past, you would need sophisticated technical skill sets, and now even a teenager could access this kind of tool and just simply click and say, hey, I want this to be done, and it does it. And I think that's also scary for defenders because it's so much easier now for people to execute attacks. And then you'll see a large volume of attacks because it's just so accessible now. Generative AI is really good because it's accessible, but this accessibility also had the downside is that when people use it maliciously, they can do a lot of things that, that is really not secure or helpful. Like you can just use AI to create deepfakes really quickly. So I think offensively, AI is enabling the attackers and people are making businesses out of it.
so like in the last, I don't know, I would say 10 years, it's maybe more than that. We've seen the rise of, we call it script kiddies
Yeah.
in cybersecurity, right? So this is sort of what you're describing as people. There's ready-made tools. There's a lot of just simple things that I don't. I'm a quote unquote hacker. I can just point and click and do that. And yeah, they get through on some cases. They do some damage, but because they don't really know what they're doing, I think, there's just a lot more noise that they're making than anything else. But yeah, you kind of have to have this basic perimeter in place. I'm wondering if like the scary hackers, so we'll say the nation state backed ones, how would they use generative AI? Because in this case, they're not necessarily, they already know what they're doing. How can they be more stealthy, or are they able to, use it to find 0 days? Like, what are some of the things that kind of keep you up at night in terms of you thinking about nation state hackers combined with the power of really powerful Gen AI?
Yeah, in cybersecurity, you mentioned script kiddies. So we have different levels of like script kiddies are the people they don't really know what they're doing. So even if AI makes something up that doesn't work, they won't know how to fix it. If you have a nation state actor, they're generally considered the most sophisticated kind of actor. So they already have the technical knowledge, they already know hacking. And what generative AI is doing is it's basically giving them access to data to execute attacks they might not know about, and they're much faster now. So, just based on open source research that's publicly available, different nation states have been using generative AI to attack other nations. And it's basically, instead of having to manually do these things, they can just create a tool and automate this attack process. And a 0 day is basically an attack that is a 0 day in that we don't know that it exists yet, but on the black market, on the dark web, they know it exists, but there's no patch available, right? So, but the public doesn't know it exists. And so with the 0 day, what they can do is they just see these patterns or these kinds of things of like ransomware, for example, and then they could say, hey, this kind of data looks like ransomware, but you can also use it to create new strains of malware that haven't existed yet, because it learns like, okay, these kinds of malware are something I want to learn about, and then it can create another one. So it's basically a
Right.
way for them to be faster, and because they know what they're doing, it's probably going to be more successful. Sometimes when you use generative AI to code, it makes mistakes. It's not like
Right.
100%, but if you know what you're doing, you can easily fix it and get it to work. And so it's a way to make them faster, and it's a way for them to create new malware that doesn't exist yet.
I feel like with the nation state actors, the thing that I think is scary is that we might not be able to detect them. That they, it's already some of the, you know, like Salt Typhoon, going back to that again. I mean, who knows how long they were in the systems before something finally bubbled to the surface and they were able to detect it. So
Right.
I think with that, with the nation state actors, like they want to be stealthy, super stealthy. They don't ever want you to know that they're in there. So they just want to look like normal, whatever normal looks like. So I feel like that's really their game, is trying to maybe use machine learning. And if they can somehow learn the kinds of patterns that the system is used to looking for, that they can kind of blend in with that and kind of just look like day-to-day things that are happening. That's that's what I kind of worry about, is things along those lines, that they just get in and that you can never find them.
Yeah, and I mean, this has been happening with APTs even before AI. I mean, advanced persistent threats. I did a research project back in college about this, and they were basically very stealthy for months or even years, where you can't even detect they're in the network. And then something happens, and then you finally find them. But these nation states backed hackers, they've been trained on all these techniques that we might not even know about. Like they know what they're doing. They know how to evade detection. So yeah, it is definitely very scary, but I think AI is just making them more effective.
So now on the defensive side, we would think, okay, We have some new tools here as well. We have machine learning. We have, I went to a class at George Washington. Maybe I took a whole series of classes from Anmol, and so now I know all this stuff. And what kind of things then can a defender do to, first of all, just detect these kinds of things and then also maybe block them from happening in the first place?
So there's this concept a lot of people might have heard of, AI versus AI. So one common thing people are doing now is like using AI to detect the malicious AI, because it's basically like AI is detecting these patterns for you. This machine learning, it says, okay, this indicates malware, you know, and then this malicious AI says, okay, let me try to make it even more sophisticated so you can't detect it. And so it's just this back and forth game with offense and defense. But a lot of tools are out there that they learn about, like these indicate an attack. For example, deepfakes are a good example. A deepfake is like, the fake video or image of someone, but it's not really that person. If you've seen the memes of Elon
Yeah,
Musk,
right. Will
doing things
Smith.
that,
Was that really
yeah,
Will Smith eating spaghetti or not?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and so people are using AI to make these deepfakes, but then you can also use AI to detect these deepfakes, like oh, like this eye is off or this spaghetti is not real. And that's again AI using pattern recognition to say, yeah, this is not real, this is a deepfake. So I think on the defensive side, they are using AI to try to be more effective with defense as well. But of course, defense is much harder than offense. And I think with defense, based on what I've seen, you can't just use one tool. For example, deep fakes, you need like 3 or 4 tools, and then maybe one tool will be able to detect it. So it's much harder to defend than attack something. But I think there are a lot of tools out there now that do use AI to help defend as well. And AI is better than manual analysis in some cases because it can see things that people might miss. But what's important that I want to emphasize is that we still need human in the loop because AI can make mistakes. So we need someone there to say, oh, this AI wasn't able to detect that. Let me make sure that I detect it and I know that this is malware, because again, it's just a pattern recognition and we all make mistakes. When I'm tired, I might miss something in an email, and AI is like that. It might miss some pattern. So we still need people there to see what AI might have missed.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things also that I think about is it seems like because if it ends up being AI versus AI, then it's going to be, okay, what's going to make this AI more powerful, if you will, than that AI? And at the end of the day, it seems like, well, that's data, right?
Yes.
So I think then that ends up pushing people into using platforms that have a lot more data. So for example, I may have a firewall, a traditional firewall protecting my network, and that firewall, I even work with the firewall vendor, and the firewall vendor can leverage all the other information that all the firewalls that vendor uses that are deployed in the fleet in the world to try to analyze that data and say, okay, we're seeing these patterns. But even then, you're talking about thousands, tens of thousands of devices, maybe hundreds of thousands of devices, right? Maybe millions, who knows? But then you look at something like Cloudflare, right? So Cloudflare provides a firewall service, if you will, for a large portion of the internet. And we started using Cloudflare recently, right? And probably they told me like 30% of all internet traffic now goes through Cloudflare. Now you're talking about the amount of data that they have in terms of what is attacking something is orders of magnitude. It's tens, if not hundreds and thousands of times more data than anyone else could have. So it seems like they would have more information, better data, more analytics to throw at it. And they could say, okay, we're now able to analyze this and look at for patterns and find things that just you know, you piddly old firewall vendors, you'll never be able to detect this at the level we can because we have so much more data. So it feels like we're pushing ourselves into having to use these big platforms like Cloudflare.
Yeah, it's basically data and getting access to data, and that's really what everyone wants. And when you have all this data, the question is, how do you store this data? How do you get the capacity to store this data? And that's why now on the news you'll see so many people are investing in data centers. Is because when we're using AI, right, we need access to all this data, so then we need a data center. So that's why people are investing so much in data, is ultimately adversaries want access to data because it can give them information like sensitive information, trade secrets, logins, passwords, and defenders want to protect their data, and they also want to detect if there might be an attack on the way. So yeah, it's all about data.
Yeah. So for the average person, I won't say average person, but let's say you're you know, you're a security person at mid-size or even major organization. It feels like you mentioned different kinds of tools that you might be able to use, but it seems like everyone is kind of throwing AI into things now, like at the RSA Security Conference, which is an annual security conference that I think is like, I don't know, it's it's the major security conference I think of, right, every year. So this last year at RSA, like everyone's just talking about AI, and it was just AI this, AI that. How, and I think some of that is like vaporware and it's not real,
Mhm.
and maybe people sort of inflate what the capabilities are of AI. From a security standpoint, like what are some of the things that, again, if I'm a CISO or a CTO, what are some of the things that I should look at with a more discerning eye to know it's just like, is this real? Can this really help me? Or is this just marketing fluff?
Yeah, I think AI is a buzzword, so all the companies and everyone wants to say they're working on AI, but sometimes it's not AI, it's just looking at data and looking at patterns in data, and they're not really using AI or machine learning. Or you have these GPT wrapper companies where they
Right.
say that they're doing something new, but it's really just calling OpenAI to say, hey, give me information about this. So there is a lot of hype. I think a lot of money is going into this AI hype. But how do you actually determine whether it's hype or it's real and it can really help you? And I think from a CISO and a CTO perspective, you first need to evaluate what it is that you're trying to solve. So, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? And then see if you need access to data to solve this problem. And then determine, okay, if I have access to this data, what do I need to do next? Do I need pattern recognition? Like, for example, if you're looking at malware detection, there are tools that already do that. Maybe research and see which tool would help you with your use case. But don't just fall for the marketing when someone says that they're using AI, because you need to really look at how is the product working and try to ask them questions like, how is this actually working? How is AI being used? And then from that, you'll be able to determine, like, are they really using AI, or are they saying a dashboard is AI? Because the other day, one of my consulting clients was thinking that this healthcare company AI platform was AI, but all it was doing was it was a dashboard scraping LinkedIn to see who was working at the company and then suggesting, like, you can email these people. And that's not AI, that's just web scraping and getting access to email addresses. But I think companies are now saying if we are using some kind of data analysis, it's AI when it's not really AI. So if you're a CISO, CTO, whether you're in tech or not, just evaluate and figure out, is it really AI or is it just marketing? And if you need help from a subject matter expert, like someone who works in AI or AI security, then ask them, like, is this really AI? Like, is this product worth it or not? But ultimately, it should be about what is the problem you're trying to solve, and do you really need AI to do it? Or is a manual approach better? Like, do I really need AI to examine 5 rows on a spreadsheet? Probably not. I can just look at those 5 rows on my own. But I will need AI if I'm trying to look at tens of thousands of data records. And I don't want to do that manually. And I want to find one needle in a haystack. Okay, maybe then AI would help me.
Right, right. Yeah, I think, from a cybersecurity perspective, I see a lot of startups that have a really innovative and sometimes novel approaches to solve problems. And it may be more work for CTOs and CISOs to adopt some of these tools, but I think it ends up being worth that effort. So I'll give an example. Like there's a lot of times where you have these big vendors that, for Microsoft, for example, they try to just sell this, sell that, co-pilot this, co-pilot that, and they just want to get you into their platform, whether it's Microsoft or CrowdStrike or whoever. But there could be smaller vendors, startups, and other tools that are highly specialized that might be able to solve that problem better for you, depending on your use case. So I stumbled across one called Sandfly. So Sandfly is a tool that is specific to Linux networks, to Linux systems, right? And so this has been in Microsoft systems, you typically can easily install an agent on the system and it can monitor things. And we're kind of used to having these background services like CrowdStrike or something running on these systems to detect things. But Linux systems, tend to be like leaner and meaner, right? And so really the public cloud runs on a lot of these kind of lean and mean systems that don't have the bandwidth for just putting a lot of these agents on there. So Sandfly can come in and Sandfly can just log in to the Linux system, pull some telemetry, pull some data off of there. There's no agent installed, so it's agentless, and just do more of an analytics, machine learning type thing. I'm not sure how much machine learning or whatever it does, but I thought it was fascinating because it was a novel approach, and I was shocked that no one else really had thought about this particular problem, and they came up with this tool to tackle it in a novel way.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think we're seeing a lot of companies out there, but it's sometimes really hard for someone that's not in the security space to know, is this really novel? Is this really a problem? Or are they just selling this marketing hype? But yeah, I think ultimately it goes down to the use case. Is it going to help you with your use case? And yeah, some of these problems maybe you didn't even think about. And now these companies are telling you about this problem. And then maybe that will help you get a stronger security posture. But ultimately, it's just analyzing your use case and seeing, does it make sense to adopt this tool or not, whether it's AI or not. That's something all organizations do.
So what kinds of things do you lean on for your own learning? So learning about new things in cybersecurity. Are there conferences that you go to? Are there people that you collaborate with? What kinds of things do you do to learn about new stuff in cybersecurity?
So cybersecurity is rapidly evolving, and I don't think anyone could know everything that's happening. What I do is I go to conferences in the industry. I give talks about topics that I'm interested in or I've worked on, and then I also attend talks in areas that are completely new to me, so something I haven't even heard about, to learn more about it. There are so many conferences out there. You don't have to go to an RSA. You could also just go to a local meetup. And they also have online conferences and online meetups in cybersecurity and other tech forums as well. So you don't even have to go in person if you just want an accessible way. You could just go online and connect with people online. A lot of my friends in the industry are from LinkedIn, actually. I would say a lot of cybersecurity people are on LinkedIn, and people post about what they learned, and then you just message them on LinkedIn, have a virtual coffee chat with them, and then learn about what they're working on. But I think for me, most of my knowledge has been in like Google Scholar and in research, just because of the nature that I'm of the work that I'm doing is very research focused. So I try to keep track of research papers in the area, and I just search for certain keywords like AI security or AI for security, something like that. But even then, it's so hard to keep track of everything that's happening. So it's kind of a combination of researching on my own, but then also connecting with others in the community and learning about what they're working on. And I think it's something you just have to do it like on a regular basis, maybe once a month or once a week. But it's kind of you focus on certain areas that you're interested in, focus on that versus trying to focus on everything that's happening.
Right. I know I did a lot of my early learning in cybersecurity through SANS, and they always have a lot of great stuff. Is SANS something that you participate in as well?
So I've done SANS, like the CTF events when I was first starting. Those were very helpful. Sometimes SANS has free webinars as well. SANS is a really great platform, but I haven't personally done their courses or certifications yet. So I've been mainly doing the CTFs and then the free webinars as of this moment. But there are a lot of great events that they host.
Yeah, yeah. So CTF is the capture the flag.
Yeah,
Is that right?
CTF
Yeah.
stands for Capture the Flag. So, for those who don't know, in cybersecurity, Capture the Flag is like a game where you're given different challenges in different areas. So, they could be like web application vulnerabilities. So, let's say I want to answer a web application vulnerability question, then it might direct me to a website, and this website is not secure. And I'm trying to figure out where a flag is or where the answer to the question is. And it typically involves finding some kind of vulnerability in whatever instance or website they've set up. And then I find the flag. And they have categories in different things like web application, reverse engineering, forensics, cryptography, many different types of cybersecurity questions. But it's a common way for people who are new to cybersecurity or even established, if they just want to learn and practice their skills, it's a way to practice.
So another part of cybersecurity, so we have, they call it the CIA, which I thought meant something different when I first started in cybersecurity. But there's another CIA, which is an acronym in cybersecurity of the different aspects of cybersecurity, if you will. So typically, so the CIA is C stands for confidentiality, then the I is integrity, and then A is availability. And they tell you in cybersecurity when you're first starting, it's like, okay, here's all the things you're responsible for, which kind of doesn't seem fair because it's like, I thought, we just take care of one of those. That's a lot, but now we're responsible for all of these. So
Yeah.
confidentiality is just making sure that, the right people see the right things and the bad guys can't get into things they're not supposed to. And then there's integrity, okay, making sure that things, don't get corrupted and you have backups and things like that. But then there's another one, which a lot of people don't think about, which is availability. So a couple weeks ago, it seems like it wasn't that long ago, but a couple weeks ago, we had AWS had an outage that took out a large portion of the internet. And from the telecommunications standpoint, and also from cybersecurity standpoint, I would imagine that availability is something that is very, very important, and is maybe even a little bit. Well, I want to say more important, but it's definitely very important in terms of being resilient. So, from a security standpoint, what are kind of some of the things that you think about from that aspect, from availability and resiliency in building out these networks?
Yes, definitely. Availability is very important for telecommunications. We look at everything in security like the confidentiality and integrity. But yes, availability is extremely important because you don't want to have your carrier go down and then no one can call someone. especially in an emergency situation, you need access to some communications network. So for this is something that the operators, so cell phone carriers, typically take care of. And a lot of it is just standard redundancy principles, like you have a backup. If something goes wrong, you have a backup. But I think from a security standpoint, one of the main attacks with availability is something called denial of service. And so this is an attack where, like you were mentioning, AWS went down. It's an attack when someone purposely tries to make a system go down so then you can't access it. And you don't want that to happen, because then basically no one can use their phone, or no one can use the web app, or no one can use the platform. And when we go back to AI, what we were talking about, people are using AI to also create these denial of service attacks and make it more effective. But then you also can use AI to detect these denial of service attacks based on the patterns. So, one idea of denial of service is we're trying to flood the network. So, we're like, a attacker would try to say, I'm going to keep sending requests to the network, but I'm not going to acknowledge or answer them. So then I'm just going to keep bombarding the network with traffic or different things. And then the network ultimately would get overwhelmed and not be able to answer anyone else's questions or messages, requests, because I'm overwhelming the network. And that's one kind of a denial of service attack. And so one research project I worked on was looking at the patterns of this traffic and saying, okay, this host, for example, is overflowing the network with requests. And we can use AI to say, okay, this indicates a potential denial of service attack in the making. So then that's something you can use AI again for offensive or for defensive.
Right, right, right. So, and I think this goes back too to talking about the big platform providers, right? Like Cloudflare, for example. Is there an equivalent in the telecommunications space, right? So Cloudflare helps for the internet, for just like website traffic, right? So they can detect en masse these kinds of things, and people will try to do a denial of service attack, and then Cloudflare will be able to block it because they can, as you say, detect these different patterns. But because of the just massive size of their network, they're basically able to detect that and absorb it. Is it just a capacity thing at that point where you just, our defense is just literally just so big that we can't absorb these? Is that what it is on the telecommunication side as well? Is it just a matter of scale to be able to absorb those, or how much is just like in the smartness or the knowledge of the system to, as you say, be able to detect these patterns and then, send it into a black hole or whatever?
Yeah, so a lot of it is around the smartness of the system. And this is something we're actively working on in standardization. So we don't know exactly what the next security product might look like in terms of detecting a denial of service attack, but it's something the security teams are actively working on. And there are many products out there. Nokia has products on this, but even other companies might also have products on it. So with telecommunications networks, you have different types of the network. So you have something called a core network. It's like the main network you could think of as the core network, but you also have something called a radio access network, and you also have applications on top of that. So for security, you have to look at each of these entities separately, because all of them are processing data and they're all doing different things. And I think multiple products are out there in the telecommunications space as well from various companies. And the challenge, I think, is that from my perspective, a lot of this is kind of an unknown right now, because we're still architecting and standardizing the network. But I can tell you that many companies are looking into these security issues, and there are many products out there for the different cell phone carriers and operators.
Yeah, it seems to me, and I know you might not be able to comment specifically on this because it's still being formulated, But it seems to me that identity will be a key piece of that and needs to be a key piece of that to prevent, just all kinds of different things, even fraud, like we see these SIM farms, right? These people that are able to just simulate all of these different cell phone numbers and just set something up in an apartment. I saw there was this case in New York where they had just this crazy amount of just SIM cards just lined up, in a rack just to simulate a bunch of phones. And then they were just sending out all these scam calls from them. So it seems to me that having good identity around it, so you when you connect to the network, I know who you are. I've authenticated you're Anmol, you're Glen. Therefore, I will let you do the things that your service allows you to do, and I've verified who you are. It seems like kind of embedding that more as into the network itself would be an important part of what the next generation would be.
Yes,
Is
it's
that true?
already actually in the network. So we already
Okay.
have features in the network right now that do validate the identity of different subscribers. So you have the IMEI number, and then you also have something called a SUPI, so a secure subscriber identification number for every UE or device that's connecting to the network. Whenever you connect to the network, this exists in the network right now. Before you can actually access the network and connect, you are authenticated and they make sure that your identity is who you say you are. So that's something that exists in the network today and will continue to exist, obviously.
Right, right. Is there anything beyond that for managing identity? Because I know now there's like SIM swapping attacks, which is like somebody could try to basically take over my phone number, right? Through a SIM swapping attack. And then they would be able to receive texts that would otherwise go to my phone. Is there specific things coming? What kinds of things can the network providers do, or will they be able to do to kind of stop those kind of attacks in the future?
So I can't comment on exactly what they will do because we are actively working on this, and this is
Okay.
something we are probably going to discuss next week during our meeting. But it's something actively being worked on, and
Mm,
many companies are involved in developing solutions for this. Yeah.
right,
And
right.
we do have security protections in place in the network already as well. And so the idea is we're just going to keep improving our security.
So you mentioned earlier, like 2030 is the timeline for 6G, give or take. And I know these things maybe take, longer than expected sometimes, but we're already, it's almost the end of 2025, 2026. We're closer to 2030 than we are to 2020, which is now it makes sense when you say it out loud, but it just doesn't feel that way sometimes, at least to me. So, okay, so 6G kind of from a standards perspective is might be finalized around 2030. When would it actually be implemented and I can go buy my iPhone 25 or whatever it is by then that would actually be doing 6G? Would that be like 10 years from now? Like, I know it's hard to say, but when would you anticipate we would have a 6G phone in our hot little hands?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but this is guessing, a disclaimer, complete guess on my part, but I'm thinking maybe 5 years after standardization. So 2035, maybe in 10 years, just based off of how 5G went, I'm thinking similar thing would happen for 6G. But yeah, I think once we have it standardized, it's just another layer of actually creating these products. So that might take a few years.
Are the cell phone vendors themselves, so like Apple and Samsung, are they also involved in these discussions
Yes,
around
they
the new
are.
standards and stuff? Okay.
Yeah, Apple, Samsung, Google, they're
Nokia, of
involved.
course. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Uh-huh.
Nokia doesn't make phones anymore, but
Right.
Nokia does make the hardware that the cell phone carriers use, like T-Mobile, Verizon, AT&T. They use products like what Nokia provides.
I don't even remember when it was now, but maybe it was 10 years ago. I don't remember when Microsoft acquired Nokia
Yeah.
and they were going to compete with Apple and with Samsung, and we would have the Microsoft phone, the Microsoft Nokia phone, and then that didn't work out. I'm not sure exactly what
Yeah,
happened, but
I'm
it
not
didn't work
sure.
out, and did Microsoft end up divesting Nokia? Do you know what happened there?
I'm not really sure what happened. I think we used to have microphone phones at some Microsoft phones at some
Right.
point. I don't think
I
we'd
I
have
I
them
remember I had
anymore.
a friend that had one of those. He had a
Yeah,
Microsoft phone. Yep, he loved it,
yeah,
but
yeah.
everyone else thought it was super weird.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do know that phones are still being sold with the Nokia name, but I think another company bought the Nokia name and they're selling phones with the Nokia name, but it's not actually owned by Nokia at this point. They're just using the Nokia name to sell a phone, but it's not a Nokia phone. They're just using that name.
So what's your team look like at Nokia for cybersecurity, and what are some of the other things your colleagues are working on?
So my team is security standardization. So a lot of my colleagues are working on security, various topics. I would say we have a global team. So I'm in the US, but I have a lot of colleagues in other countries like Asia, Europe. So we work on global time zones and we collaborate asynchronously. And they work on other topics as well, like post quantum cryptography, internet security. They're involved with internet security, IETF, Internet Engineering Task Force. We have colleagues involved in cloud security, basically all the different security elements you could think of, or all the different security areas you could think of. We have people working on all those different areas.
Also, the other day I was at well, it's actually one of a friend came over and he was showing me these Meta Ray-Ban glasses that have, it's basically like an AR. It's not VR, but it's like an AR glasses. And he was using it and he was talking about this might replace cell phones. And who knows, it may just end up being another thing. But is that something that, from a security standpoint, is this just like another device that that people may end up using? Some people will be walking around, some people still have their cell phones, some people have their AR glasses. Are there any specific security challenges then with some of these additional technologies like these glasses?
Yeah, I think we are anticipating using AR, XR type virtual reality metaverse glasses or other devices. And so telecommunication standards, we're just thinking of that as another use case. And that's something that they're first trying to figure out, what is the network going to look like? So right now it's architecture mode. Like, what is that going to look like? And then we anticipate there might be other security challenges or other security considerations for the metaverse XR VR glasses. I wrote a paper with some of my colleagues about this. It was effective security administration in the metaverse using 6G. So, in that, we proposed a way to use metaverse to authenticate a user, and then the user can use an XR VR type system to look at the network and see what's happening for security administration, like a virtual reality security administration view or a system or application that they could use. So that is something all of these companies are discussing and they're thinking about. And actually, that was one of the main marketing points of 6G even 5 years ago, was metaverse is one of the key use cases for 6G. So I think that's something we're going to actively keep working on and considering. And from a network perspective, whether it's a cell phone or it's an XR device, it's all treated as a device that again has to authenticate itself to the network, register properly before it can connect.
Right, right. So, wow, that's fascinating. So it sounds like there'll be just like I think of it as just like another layer, another network, another thing that you mentioned you would get connected to the metaverse. And that makes sense, right? Because the phone network, yeah, you can do something that's faster than what we have now, and who knows what phones will be able to do, but it seems like ultimately there will be diminishing returns as far as what you can get out of the phones, and that the next new exciting things would be from when we say AR, that's like augmented reality, so I'm seeing, if I put on these glasses, what I saw in that case is I could still see everything, but then there was like sort of like a heads up display that I could see additional things that were layered on top of what was there. So that's is that right? That's AR. Then there's also VR. Then you said XR. I don't know if that means
XR
it just
means extended
encompasses.
reality, but yeah,
Okay.
it's basically
Yeah.
like AR. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the industry, they sometimes say slash XR to indicate extended reality. But
Right.
just think of it like virtual reality.
Yeah. So that's when I think about it, I think that makes sense for what 6G a lot of what 6G would be, or at least the exciting marketing stuff of what would be in 6G is those kinds of things. Yeah, that's cool. That's exciting to think about. So it's a little bit, I don't know, maybe I'm getting old, but it's a little bit unnerving as well to just imagine people just walking around in these goggles or glasses or whatever, just kind of they're in reality, but they're not, they're also in another reality at the same time simultaneously. Yeah. Future. Future be scary. But cool at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we have a lot to look forward to in the future, and we shouldn't be scared about these technology advancements.
Yeah. Well, Anmol, thank you so much. This has been so informative. I learned a lot, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk about the work you're doing at Nokia, 6G. This is also, it's a super exciting time, I'm sure, for you to be involved at the cutting edge of these things.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to Data and Confused. I really appreciate you listening. Please go ahead and subscribe as I get this podcast off the ground. I have a lot of amazing guests planned, industry experts and thought leaders from the tech and cybersecurity world. So look forward to seeing you in future episodes. Thank you.